All right, cool. All right, so let's start with we're going to go around. We're going to say our name, where we're from, and what role the scripture is playing in your daily life. And start with you. You knew it was, yeah, you said, this chair was right here.
I know. It's my own fault. I'm Samantha. I'm from the U.S.
Where in the U.S.?
California.
Where in California?
Los Angeles.
Where in Los Angeles?
Manhattan Beach.
Okay.
Beach
I had my Kundalini awakening in Venice Beach, California.
Nice.
Yes, that's what I was asking. I lived there for a year and a half.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. I don't know the answer to that question because I don't really know anything about the scriptures. So should I answer that at the end?
No, I mean, she'd probably be like, none yet.
None yet.
But after today...
A lot. Yeah.
Samantha's on it. Well done, Samantha. I want to give her a brownie. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jane. I'm from Edinburgh in Scotland. And scriptures in my life currently also none at the minute.
Okay.
So far.
Great class for you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming, Jane.
Hi, this is Eleni. I'm from Greece. Yeah, no scripture.
Okay.
Amy, and I am from Australia, and I know nothing about yoga scriptures.
Okay. Hey, we're going to expand it. Any scripture.
We all get brownies, right?
I don't want to be too different, but I'm Cem from Turkey. I also actually had my awakening experience start in Los Angeles, and it was like the first place I went was what was the place called? The Self Awakening Center of Yogananda. That's where I met my guru, and I actually read Bhagavad Gita like all the time. Like I probably read it more than like 25 times, and I read it like daily most of the time, so I can like get more like inspiration from it daily. I read Srimad Bhagavatam also, and
Read the whole thing?
kinda.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I read like I had like books of it, so but I can't memorize it. But Bhagavad Gita, I know it. I know the whole scripture like by memory. Yeah.
All right. Give me a verse that you're living by from Bhagavad Gita, Jim. Tell me how you apply it in your daily life.
I think the verse is about how like you shouldn't.
No, give me the verse.
The verse would be.
Well, you don't have to tell me chapter and verse, but tell me what the verse is.
The verse is about the renunciation of work. Krishna talks to Arjuna about renunciation of work, whether he should get away from work or whether he should be doing his work, and what is the best way to do it. And Krishna talks about how renunciation is not as good as working on behalf of God and like devoting what you're doing to God and trying to do it with perfection. So I really like that because I tried to renunciate at some point, and I found that like devotional work is better than renunciation.
Perfect. Do you remember one verse and related to that, an actual verse of it? All right, here's what I'm saying. You know why? Like, if you've been in this class, and I was going to say I'm not putting you in a spot, but I actually am. But lovingly, you know why? Because we want to be precise with our words. So you said you had it all memorized, which would have been super impressive.
It's the when you memorize something, it's not like you memorize by heart. You don't memorize it word by word. It's not like I didn't mean to say that I memorize it word by word, but I know the whole story by memorization and all the chapters and everything. So it's not like word. And Bhagavad Gita, when you read Bhagavad Gita, it has many different translations. So one translation is going to be different from another. So it's remembering the whole scripture. It's not memorizing the Sanskrit words, you know.
Oh yeah, not necessarily Sanskrit. Okay. Did everyone understand what Jim was saying? It's a very important point. Yeah? What were you saying? What was he saying, Mark?
He's saying that he knows it in his heart.
No, I was saying in terms of what he was, what he was discussing about the scripture. Did everyone understand what he was saying? So this is one teaching from a scripture. Actually, if you come to my class, I've talked about this a few times. There's a debate that goes on in yogic schools. Is it better to renounce the world, step away from it, and go to the hills and become a yogi, meditate there and realize the self? Or is it better to stay in the world and to devote all of your work in the world to the Supreme, and in that way attain to God? Who thinks it's better to escape from the world, to renounce the world, and in that way you can find peace enough to meditate and realize the self? Who thinks that's the best way? Who thinks the best way is to devote all your acts to the divine? Everyone's like, neither.
I think it's important to do whatever you feel a yearning in your soul. I don't think one's better or worse.
Okay.
At least your nature is your duty.
Ooh.
Is a quote.
And Kian, you can put your hands up to God.
True. All right. So agreed. So however, what we're going to do is we're going to refine them. I agree. But we're going to say, on the whole, for most people, which one is better? So this, which is what?
Being a part of the world and devoting all your acts.
Okay.
For most people.
Agreed. And that's what God said. That's what Jim said. So we all agree. Actually. Well, God, Jim. I'm in. All right, thanks, Jim.
But also there's another part of Bhagavad Gita. It's about the case. So like if you're a Brahmana, you should actually renunciate the world. And if you're a Kshatriya or Sudra or Vaishya, you shouldn't. So it's like it definitely depends on your personality too.
Amelia was saying it. So Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says actually your duty is determined by your nature. So if your nature is to be that of a renunciate, you should renounce. Most human beings do not possess that type of nature. However, why are we even talking about God? Just really quickly, definition of yoga. Who's been here before? Yeah. Say your name real quick.
Ariel. There we go.
Ariel, that's right, Ariel. What is yoga?
Union, basically, and union between the body and the mind.
Audio. No. This is a common misconception.
I was here, but I was not here.
Hey, I appreciate the boldness, though. Launching out there, I appreciate that. Okay, it's a common misconception that yoga means union of body, mind, and soul. Everyone heard that definition? Yes. Not true.
May I add something? It occurred to me later that I read the scripture somewhere from Patanjali that says that yoga is chitta vritti nirodha, which means that yoga is controlling the fluctuations of the mind.
Yep.
Yes, so she nailed it. Famous verse. If you do a yoga teacher training, typically they're going to teach you that verse. It's verse number 1, 2 of the Yoga Sutras. The second verse, Yogas chitta riti nirodha. Yoga is bringing to cessation, meaning bringing to an end the whirlpools of activity in the mind. Yoga, chitta. It actually even goes deeper. People don't realize this. Sanskrit's very precise, so it has words for different parts of the mind. Chitta is actually the subconscious mind. Manas is the conscious mind. So actually, chitta, so yoga chitta riti means whirlpools of activity. Nirodha, eliminating, bringing to an end. So it's actually saying, the actual definition of yoga according to Patanjali is, yoga is bringing to an end the whirlpools of activity in the subconscious mind. So that's how hard it is. It's not even just stilling your conscious mind, it's clearing out your subconscious, where all your traumas, all your fears, all your hidden desires are also stored, bringing those to an end. Then, however, you know what? The term yoga, what's the definition? It does mean union. It does not mean union of mind, body, and spirit. It actually means union of the individual soul with the supreme soul. Basically means union of God, of you with God. The truth of the matter is, yoga involves bringing the body and mind under control, and in that way you want to unite with it, but the only purpose is to bring it under control so that you can transcend it. So yoga is actually transcending the body and mind to reunite your soul consciously with the divine. That's the union that is referred to. And you know what's nice about, this is why we're going to go back to the scriptures, this, I'm going to say it outright, false teaching is pervasive in the West, that it means union of mind, body, and spirit. And it's not a bad teaching. And in some ways, like on the path of yoga, you do unite them, right? Because you want to bring them under control, so in that way they're united. But think about how pervasive and complete that teaching is. If you ask anyone in the West who's practicing what they call yoga, they'll probably tell you that, right? And what's happened is we're hearing it, and most of us are not questioning it, most of us are not investigating it. What gets me is if you actually investigate it, the scriptures are super clear. The scriptures, and there's numerous scriptures, there's dozens of them, all saying the same things in different ways. In fact, the term yoga means union of the soul with the self so explicitly that that's why it's only called yoga. It's only called union because everyone knows what the union is referring to. They're going into how. So Patanjali's telling you how. By bringing to cessation the whirlpools of activity in the mind. So a real definition of yoga is union of the soul with God through bringing the mind to absolute stillness. That is the scriptural definition of yoga. That's what yoga is. Julia.
I was going to say that so like 1.3 of the Yoga Sutras is like, yoga is the Chitta Vijnanadeva, and then it says like, then the seer resides in himself.
Then the seer rests in her own true nature.
Yeah. So it's like, it's really critical to like go to the next one to know what is being referred to. It's like, okay, great, like that's what's like occurring, but then what happens then is...
Right, and it's what we were talking about with Gene. Once the mind is stilled, Krishna says, again in Bhagavad Gita, you're united with yourself. And the self is that God. So yoga means also union with your own true self, your highest self. So that's your, go on, Ariel.
Oh no, I was going to go on that. I just gave you easily the faith,
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to go about Atman, going back to Atman, but she said you did that.
Okay, Paramatma means the supreme self. Yeah. Here's what I also like people to leave with. I'm probably going to leave with a lot, but find one thing. I would like this. Oftentimes when I say what is yoga, people say, well, to me, how about we do that second? Because yoga means something, period. And how about we actually know what yoga means and repeat what it actually means and then say what that means to us rather than skipping what yoga actually means and then saying yoga means to me, because then it can mean a whole bunch of different things. Does that make sense? The reason we do that is yoga is preserved, and I say this all the time. The reason you want to preserve real yoga, because it's the way out. Yoga is the way home, it's the way to your true self, and it's the only way to end suffering. To actually bring it to an end. You have to unite with yourself. Yoga is the way. Okay, so that was kind of long-winded. But back to, did you want to say something?
I wanted to put right down what is yoga.
On the board? Okay, yes. Thank you for telling me. Good idea. Yeah, no worries. Yoga. There you go. So yoga is union of the soul with God through bringing the mind to absolute stillness. That is the actual definition of yoga given by the people who invented it and written in scriptures. And it's written profusely over, and we're going to read from it. We're going to read about it. I'll prove it. What is God? God's the highest self of all beings. It's the source of all beings, and it's the oneness. So it's actually union with your own higher self. And that's something super, super good to remember. Like when I've had my issues with God, right? Anyone ever had issues with God? Right. What helped me was Goddess Saraswati telling me, God is your own highest self. And you're not surrendering to anything but your own true self. So beat yourself up all you want. Right? Fight with yourself all you want. Okay, so, but let's go back. Boom. Karen, taking about to what Jim was saying. So there's a great debate, really quickly. Right? We're pulling out the scriptures. So the debate is, should I renounce or should I work in the world? So the reason I brought this up is because this is why the question was should I work for myself? Never comes up because everything is for God. If you want to unite with God, you're going to have to be devoting your actions to God. You want to unite with your own highest self, you got to be devoting your actions to your own highest self. So the question is, should you work for God or should you renounce? Krishna actually in the book, so Jim, don't worry if you don't know this, but I think you might. What book is the Bhagavad Gita actually a part of? No. That's okay though. Good guess. Yes, the Mahabharata.
The Mahabharata is the work. Didn't you ask the book?
I said, what book is the Bhagavad Gita a part of? Meaning it's a... what is the Mahabharata?
Well, I don't know the book. Mahabharata.
Oh, if you're into scriptures, you want to go there. Mahabharata. We're going to talk about it later. We're going quickly. Okay, so Mahabharata means the great epic of India. Bharat or Bharat? No, that's something. That's a Buddhist. How would you say? That's a path of Buddhism, Mahayana. The Mahabharata, Maha means great, Bharat means India. So it's the great epic of India. It's one of the main scriptures. In fact, here's the thing. The reason I'll quote the Mahabharata, this is what the Mahabharata says about itself. It says, what is in this book may be in other places, but if it is not in this book, it will not be found anywhere else. Bold claim, and it delivers. It's all there. And in fact, so I go for like the major, what I call the major scriptures, non-denominational. I'll talk more about it, but ones that are accepted by all the paths of yoga. It's massive. It's the longest epic on earth. It's actually been rewritten, so it actually doesn't need to be as long as it is, but it's 18 times as long as the Iliad and the Odyssey combined. It's all in there. Adventure, love, romance, drama, action, battles, and then it's replete with spiritual teachings. It covers everything. So in it, there's all these debates. In fact, what I love about yoga is there's all these debates. So what we were saying, thank you, Mark. So in the Mahabharata, there's debates, and Krishna is actually listens to these debates about renunciation versus work. And so Riti, right? Riti means a whirlpool of activity. So he says that there's two paths. Krishna says there are two paths to the divine. One is called Pariti, which means with action, right? With whirlpools of activity. Pariti. And the other one is called Niriti, without action. And Krishna says some people opine that the path of Niriti is best, that one should renounce one's duties in order to seek the Supreme. And some people say that the path of Pariti is better. And he says, my opinion concurs with the latter. And then he goes, and I may be combining two different verses, but then he says, ceaselessly does the wind blow, and ceaselessly does the sun rise. And if the sun did not perform his work, all life on earth would stop. And he goes even further. I'm definitely missing verses here. He says in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, for me, I am God and I have no duties, but I myself work just to set an example for all other beings. He says, because if I did not work, all other beings would follow my example and the universe would fall into ruin. He says, Indra, the king of heaven, attained his exalted position through work. And he goes even further. He said, actually, through austerities. Austerity means doing hard work, suffering for the sake of something later. He said, so Indra, the king of heaven, attained his position through austerity and work. He said, this is true of all the principal gods. So he says, as Jim was saying, better to work and devote all your actions to the Supreme. And in this way you get freed of karma. And he also says, because quite frankly, you're inclined toward work, right? It's harder for you to not work than to work. So he says, following this natural path, devote your action to the Supreme. But I wanted to bring up a beautiful verse from the Bhagavad Gita to support Jim's points on just that point. So Jim was saying, like that worked for you, right? As opposed to renouncing work for God. He says, and this is Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verse 1. He says, the Supreme Lord said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is actually a renunciate. And he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. Ooh, did you guys hear that? All right, we're going to read from the scriptures so that we know how poetic it is. How about this? Maybe you've heard this. The founder of the Hare Krishna movement, he said this about Bhagavad Gita. Did you hear Jim said he's read it about 20 times? Do you get something out of it every time you read? Show me another book you can do that with. 21st time, he says it's ever new. This is another thing about the scriptures. They're ever new, literally every time you read it. You know why? Because it's divine knowledge, it's divine wisdom, and we forget. Because even though this is divine, the environment we're in, we're covered over. So we forget. And so it's reminding us of what we are all the time, first of all. And second of all, it's actually a divine transmission. And there's nothing better. Like if you read Bhagavad Gita, Jim, let me ask you, do you think a human could have written? Do you think that could have come from a human mind?
No, because like when you're reading it, you really get like I read other religious books too. Like you sometimes get kind of a bliss, but when you're reading the Bhagavad Gita, you get into a transcendental nature. Like you're not in a regular human nature, and it's like it's written in such a way that a human mind, I think, it couldn't understand all that duality, all those like different kind of positions of understanding. Like I don't think it's possible.
I'll say this. I'm going to prove it. I'll read some stuff and you can tell me if a human could have written it. Not only is it knowledge beyond like a human's thought processes, but it's actually written down to the correct syllables, meaning like each line in some verses will have 9 syllables, 9 syllables, 9 syllables, 13 syllables, 13 syllables, 13 syllables or something like that per line. And it's still the highest knowledge. Like imagine a human being having the capacity to write the highest knowledge and then to get it down to a syllable so that it can be sung in different meters. Like it's impossible. What I'm saying is, how about this? When I was being trained as a yogi, actually with the Hare Krishnas, we had a practice. Part of my sadhana, which was daily spiritual practice, was I had to read scripture for 1 hour a day. You know why? Because what you're doing is reshaping your mind with divine knowledge. Because if you go, as soon as you leave, the vibration is going to drop, and you're going to be getting less than divine knowledge. I mean, everything's divine, but it's going to be a heavier, deeper vibration. So you fortify with it. Even if you don't understand it, the knowledge gets in, and then you understand it more and more. And every time you read it, it's new. And they said, if you can actually, this is why I asked if you had one verse memorized, and if you could live by it. This is what they used to do. If you could memorize one, I have what I call seed verses, and I'm going to read some of my seed verses. They're verses that I've memorized, and I live by, and I apply them in real life situations, and I do it on the spot. And if you can get one of those verses, that alone you can become liberated. So I remember I used to read, and I had a friend named Gopala, and that's the name for Krishna. And I remember I used to go to the Hare Krishna temple when I, needed some shelter. I wanted to have a good spiritual conversation. I wanted a good kirtan. But I remember I was in a really bad state once, and I went to the temple. Saw my friend Gopal, and as per my habit, I was complaining. And I started complaining to Gopal. Gopal said, "Come here, sit here. I'll be back." He stormed off, came back with a Bhagavad Gita, shoved it in my face. He said, "Read this. I'll be back." He gave it to me and came back in an hour. And I just sat there reading. He said, "How do you feel?" I said, "I can't remember what I was upset about." Literally, it's medicine. Because, and I said, he goes, even if you don't understand, you're getting a divine transmission. Who's heard the term satsang? Sada, what's satsang?
It is like a union of people coming together for truth.
Yes. Break that word down for me.
Which word?
Satsang.
Sat means truth, and Sangha means community.
Yes. So this is satsang, a coming together for truth. And when you are alone, Scripture is your satsang. And I'm going to read a verse about the power of satsang later. But here, I'm going to read this verse again so we just see how deep this is, and we'll move on. So I want to go back to this verse. It says, "One who is unattached to the fruits of his work." So this is a key. You work. Imagine this. This is actually what the first thing I got. I got Bhagavad Gita from a Hare Krishna in Venice Beach. Has anyone seen him handing out books? Right? I got a book, and I read the second chapter, and I was shocked by the philosophy of working and not wanting the fruit of your work, but giving the fruit of your work to God. But the idea of then working and giving your fruit to God was alien to me, but it made sense. And he said, a normal human being wants to work and enjoy the fruit. And in doing so, you're bound by the results of work, which is called karma. But the way to get free of that bondage is you work and you give the results to the Supreme. The Supreme is beyond the law of action and reaction. So therefore, you get no reactions to your work. You're free of karma. And when you've finished up your karma in this life and you have pure devotion to the Supreme, you transcend this plane of misery to a plane of bliss. But what I really like about it, he says, if you're unattached, but you work as you're obligated to. Why are you obligated? Because you're born with duties. This is another argument that's out there. People will argue that when you're born, you only have duties to yourself, not according to the Vedas. It says the Vedas, you have duties to all of existence, to God, your community, the earth, human beings in general, right? That you're born with these duties, and your nature gives you a particular work. Rumi said, everyone was born for a particular type of work, and the desire for that work was put into everyone's heart. And this is another thing about the cult. The cult will oftentimes, or not even just a cult, it couldn't be a cult, it could just be a teacher who wants to control you, will tell you, this is your duty. Whereas actually the real teacher will analyze and understand your nature and say, this is your duty based on your nature. not on what my group needs and not on what I need from you. Your real leader is going to operate, is going to help you operate according to your nature and serve according to that. So he says, so if you work as you're obligated to, then you're a renunciate. What is real renunciation? Working, not giving up work, but working and giving the fruits to the divine. That's renunciation. So renunciation means giving up, letting go. And he says that person is also the true mystic, not one who lights no fire and performs no duty.
Yes.
About the religious activities, Krishna also talks about how like you shouldn't actually like continue to perform like religious activities just for the sake of it, but at some point you should actually get rid of everything and just follow Krishna. And it's not like you should even like Bhagavad Gita and Vedantas and all those sutras are a way for you to get the union with God, and when you get the union with God you should transcend all the nature, even like goodness, trying to be good, trying to be this, trying to be that, and just you like take your teaching from God one-on-one. So at that point you actually even get rid of the teachings that you were supposed to follow at some point. So and that is like, that opposes the movements anyways, because the movements are like something that you do all together, but at some point when you really get into a state of consciousness, you can actually communicate with God. Like a hidden person can do that. It's not like something that is only Jesus could do or someone else could do. It's like you get this like enormous bond that is a friendship too.
But I mean, I honestly believe, this is my belief is that, I mean, we all have scripture within us. You just have to like, it's just like, and through yoga, whether it be asana or meditation, it just naturally comes forward. But it is nice to come together and have a discussion of ideas.
You know what? I agree with you. Actually, you know what? And when you're talking about it is all within you, the term educate, right, comes from the Latin educare. E in front of a word from the Latin means out. Ducare means to draw. The term educate actually means to draw out what's already there. So I agree with you. And so you know what? Us studying the scripture is to have a resonance outside of ourselves of what's inside so that that can draw out. And it's also to reprogram our minds, because the mind is the barrier between you and your true self. So that's why we study outside. That's why we don't renounce the scriptures, meaning give up the scriptures, because it helps draw out what is inside and it helps neutralize the barrier to our true self, which is the mind. How does that sound, Camille? Okay. Thank you.
The name is Emilia, originally from Finland. What was your name? Camille. So I love how you describe it, that it's already within us, the scripture. So my relationship to it is, it's a way to remember. Just reading it is me reminding myself of the nature of existence, which I keep forgetting because the veil is so thick. So for me, it's a roadmap home. And,
So Amelia, are you using the scriptures daily?
Not right now. I was reading more. I had a more better practice some time ago, but I think being here is reminding me to go back to the practice. Because it was just listening to us having a conversation, and we humans, we have such wonderful, beautiful ideas and all these questions. And there's just, like Jim said, there's a resonance and vibration. So even our best, brilliant ideas, they don't reach to that, what it sounds like, just simply reading a verse from the scriptures. You know, it's like,
It's true. In fact, you know what? Sometimes I'm talkative. And sometimes I catch myself talking, and then I read a scripture verse, and I'm reminded, bro. Do you know what I mean? So I'm with you on that.
My name is Oscar. I was born in Germany. and you just awoken the interest in scripture. I didn't know much about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ariel. I'm from Argentina. Yeah, I have to say that I'm also just scratching the surface with scriptures. My interest started about 4 years ago, and little by little, I'm just getting into the sutras of Patanjali and the Gita, but just barely scratching the surface. And I totally relate with what you said. It's like, for me, it's very difficult sometimes to remember things or just expressing them back to somebody else or giving them back. So what I am at the moment, I'm trying to just to live by them or sort of what I remember of them. So like even simple things, there's like, and see how teachings of all these just come together sometimes, one talking about non-violence, and then the other one telling a story about a mosquito bothering a guru, things like that, and what to do with that. So yeah, I'm just trying to get what I can. And I remember one or two that are important, and then the rest trying to figure it out along the way, still a long way.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Colleen, and I just arrived a couple of days ago. Haven't been here before.
Walked into a firestorm.
It seems that I don't search anything out. I go with the flow, and things are jumping in my way. I only started practicing yoga 5 months ago, and suddenly I'm in a group called Practical Philosophy that's led to a study group for the Bhagavad Gita. I've never heard of it before. Suddenly I see it everywhere. I'm also studying Sanskrit, which is too hard, but I tried to get out of it. They said, no, you still got to keep coming. And my friend's in the hotel room just having a beauty treatment, and I come down here for a juice and saw this class, and I wandered in here and I thought, oh my God, all these people know everything. And I'm just so, oh my God, it's so deep. And there's such a lot to learn, but I'm learning every day. And I've got to go check out my hotel now and go home. So I've been watching the time, but I wish I could stay longer. So.
We run over. I blame Sada.
My name is Liv. I'm fairly easy to the scriptures as well. I think for me, especially when I'm in times of where I'm like emotionally not well, or I think I'm the only one going through this pain that I'm having right now, the only one on planet Earth, I think it reminds me that everything I'm going through, somebody a couple thousand years ago went through that, already. And I think so that's very soothing, and I think the wisdom is very helpful.
One line, like you can read one line and just be like, whoa, and digest it for ages. The one that I remember, because I was doing like a video edit the other day, was truth alone conquers, not untruth. Through truth, the divine plan is spread out. And I've been thinking about that one a lot lately.
Wow. It's the national motto of India. Truth alone conquers, not untruth. Through truth, the divine plan is spread out. Also the poetry of it. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll quickly, what we'll do is I'll go over what some of the scriptures are. We'll read some of them and we'll go. So, the foundation of actually Hindu philosophy, yoga philosophy, are scriptures called the Vedas. The Vedas means knowledge. They're books of knowledge. There are 4 Vedas originally. And each of the 4 Vedas have 4 sections. The last sections are called the Upanishads. The Upanishads are the philosophical portions of the Vedas. They're considered the cream of the Vedas. So we're going to actually read from the Upanishads. So that's one class. So the Vedas are what's called Shruti. Shruti means that which is heard. That which is heard. Which means the idea was that these Vedas were divinely inspired. And so the sage who wrote them down, or the sages who wrote them down, heard them directly from within and wrote them down. Then we have something called Smriti, which means that which is remembered. And these are spiritual stories. So they're stories that have spiritual lessons, and they're also histories. So histories of ancient Egypt, even histories of our universe, history of battles between the gods and the demons in heavens. These are all listed in things that are called smritis. Then there's something called the itihasas. Itihasas are histories. The Mahabharata is one of those. And so this is a super brief summary, and it's also of the ones that are going to be super practical. I can give you scriptures that you can go to, but I want to show you just the lineage. There's also something called the Puranas. The Puranas are considered Smriti. So the Vedas themselves, Shruti, Puranas are Smriti. So the Puranas, these histories are of India, the Itihasas mainly. The Puranas are histories of the gods mainly, and stories of the gods. Then the yeah, I'm sorry. ITHIHASA.
These are sections of the Vedas?
No, I'll explain again. So the Vedas, there are 4 Vedas. They have 4 sections. So I'm skipping over what those sections are. What I'll do is, let me just get the main things up there and I'll give you a little bit more detail. Vedas, 4 Vedas. There's 4 sections in each of the Vedas. The last sections are called the Upanishads. The reason they're important is because they're the philosophical portions of the Vedas. So the Vedic philosophy is encapsulated, and it's also called the cream of the Vedas. Yes, the Upanishads. So these are, and then there's something called the 10 major Upanishads. You can get those as a PDF downloads. That's why I'm actually targeting those. Then the Itihasas are histories of India. Of course, there's also all these divine elements in them. There's one called the Ramayana, one called the Mahabharata, which we've talked about. The Mahabharata is the great epic of India. The Bhagavad Gita, which is the Song of God, is a part of the Mahabharata. This is probably the most famous text, probably from the All East, probably scriptural text from all the East. Some people call it the Hindu Bible. It's actually God talking about yoga.
Does it, in India, do some schools teach that Bhagavad Gita comes from Ramayana?
No. Okay. And so these are just other terms. Shruti means Vedas. The Smriti are things that are remembered. The Puranas and the Itihasas. There's also other ones that we won't get into called Agamas and Darshanas. Agamas are texts from different schools. There's tantric schools, so then there's various Hindu sects, right? And I won't get too deeply into this, but there's followers of Vishnu as the supreme called Vaishnavas, followers of Shiva as the supreme called Shaivites, followers of the goddess as the supreme called Shaktas. Then there's followers of a 5 god system or Manifestation of Divine called Smartas. And they will have their own scriptures. Then there'll be tantric schools that have their own scriptures. So you know what, I won't get too many into the details because I'd rather start reading about them. But I want to give you scriptures that you can go to. One of the Puranas is called Srimad Bhagavatam, or the Bhagavat Purana. And within that, so there'll be scriptures within scriptures. There's a text called the Uddhava Gita. So I'm giving you the main scriptures that I have studied, and that really I go with. And the truth is, these scriptures are so replete, meaning so full, that if you could read one of them and even if you get a verse in one of them, you get it. But if you can understand Bhagavad Gita or the Upanishads or the Uddhava Gita, you got it. So the reason I'm bringing these up is these are the ones that I read. They're available as free PDF downloads on the website. They work. So everyone got that just as a little bit of a basis. And of course I can go on. There's actually dozens of scriptures and everything. Okay. So that's a really brief thing about the scriptures. So now I want to read from a book called the Chandogya Upanishad. And I want to just give you a taste of what the scripture has to offer. And so this is from chapter 6, and thank you. And it's a story of a child called Swetaketu. And he says, Swetaketu was Uddalaka's son. When he was 12, his father said to him, "It is time for you to find a teacher, dear one, for no one in our family is a stranger to the spiritual life." So Swetaketu went to a teacher and studied all the Vedas for 12 years. At the end of this time, he returned home, proud of his intellectual knowledge. "You seem to be proud of all this learning," said Uddalaka, "but did you ask your teacher for that spiritual wisdom which enables you to hear the unheard, think the unthought, and know the unknown?" "What is this wisdom, father?" asked the son. Uddalaka said to Swetaketu, "As by knowing one clump of clay, dear one, we come to know all things made out of clay, that they differ only in name and form, while the stuff of which are made is clay. As by knowing one gold nugget, dear one, we come to know all things made out of gold, that they differ only in name and form, while the stuff of which all are made is gold. As by knowing one tool of iron, dear one, we come to know all things made out of iron, that they differ only in name and form, while the stuff of which all are made is iron. So through that spiritual wisdom, dear one, we come to know that all life is one." "My teachers must not have known this wisdom," said Swetaketu, "for if they had, how could they have failed to teach it to me? Please instruct me with this wisdom, father." "Yes, dear one, I will," replied. "In the beginning was only being, one without a second. Out of himself he brought forth the cosmos and entered into it. There is nothing that does not come from him. Of everything, he is the innermost self. He is the truth. He is supreme. You are that, Swetaketu. You are that. Please tell me more, father, about this self." "Yes, dear one, I will. As bees suck nectar from many a flower and make their honey one, so that no drop can say, 'I am from this flower or that,' all creatures, though one, know not that they are one. There is nothing that does not come from him. Of everything, he is the innermost self. He is the truth. He is supreme. You are that. You are that. Please, father, tell me more about this self." "Yes, dear one, I will. As the rivers flowing east and west merge in the sea and become one with it, forgetting they were ever separate rivers, so do all creatures lose their separateness when they merge at last into pure being. There is nothing that does not come from him. Of everything, he is the innermost self. He is the truth. He is supreme. And you are that. You are that. Cool. All right, that's a brief introduction to the scriptures.